Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're doing our first league guide ready for FIFA 22. Now this is going to be purely FIFA 22 content, but of course you can apply most of it to FIFA 21 because not too much has changed. Similarly to last year's MLS video, which was actually the first league guide I ever made, we're going to be talking through the league rules to have a realistic career. We're going to be talking about the youth academy, where you should be scouting, where to limit player ratings to be realistic and tough, which teams to choose in which different tiers, which teams have stadiums, and maybe recommending a couple of realistic signings or types of signings that the league would usually have in real life. So let's get started with the first thing, which is going to be the realistic rules. Now, unless something's changed in FIFA 22, the MLS rules will not be modeled properly in game, so you're going to have to try and implement them yourselves. Now, the MLS is known for having complicated rules, but it isn't actually that bad. There are only 3 or 4 different rules that you actually need to follow to have a realistic and fun career mode on FIFA though. So these are going to be only having 30 players in your squad at once. Now this just means you're going to have to keep your youth academy prospects in the youth academy until they're ready for first team football, and make sure you don't have too many backup players clogging up your team. Fairly simple. The second one is you're allowed 20 players who have to have less than $5,000 per week as a wage. So this is a tough one because you're not going to get too many good players who actually want this kind of wage, which means you're going to have to try and find players from obscure leagues with low reputations so you can actually sign players on less than this £5,000 a week. But you are allowed to sign 2 players under 24 from any country on any wage. Alongside these 2 players, you can have 8 players of any age from any country on any wage. So you'll have 2 under 24s and 8 players over 24, or they could be under 24 as well, where you can have any wage and they can be from anywhere. That really does give you quite a lot of flexibility on building your squad. You can sign Brazilians, British players, French players, Spanish players, Germans, wherever you want to get the players from, you can sign them on any wage. So the chances are you're going to have your 10 players who are going to be a lot better than the rest, and then you're going to have 20 backup players or youth players who have really small contracts. It really does give you a nice blend of talent. Speaking of youth players, where should you be sending your youth scouts? Well, of course you need to scout the USA and probably should be scouting Canada. Another unique thing about the MLS is that you can really justify scouting any other country because of how their college system works. You'll get players from any nation in the world wanting to go to American universities. Because of this, they're eligible for the draft, which means they can join the MLS in youth academy. So really, you could have that scout from Brazil, you could have the scout from France, Spain, England. No matter where you want to send them is kind of realistic. The toughest thing to actually represent in the game is how to do the draft. So what I like to do is do a 9-month scout in March for youth players. Don't look at the scout reports, and then pick 4 or 5 of them at the end of the season when the draft usually is. These would be my draft picks, which of course isn't actually how the draft works, but it's the closest way to get that suspense of wondering who's in the draft, picking 4 or 5 of them, giving you good youth players, but also making it a bit more MLS ready. And of course, if you do wait the 9 months, quite a lot of the better players will have already been picked up by other teams. So you're not going to be able to get superstars constantly. You might have to settle for a 90 potential and then a couple of 83 potentials, giving you a more realistic balance. And I really do like to do the draft that way. Just to recap, you do the draft by doing a 9-month youth scout in March. You'll get all your reports back in December when the draft usually is, and then pick 4 or 5 players from your scout report in December just as it expires. The next year do the same thing, start it in February or March depending on when you want to do it, and then repeat for as long as you want to continue the save. It really does make it a lot more fun, and I highly recommend you do this if you do have an MLS save. For signing real players, I would recommend that you limit your signings to 80 rated. You won't see too many players above this joining the league, but almost every team has 1 player above 80 rated. So to keep it more tough and realistic, I'd give yourself 1 player who's between 80 and 85 rated, and then I'd make the rest of the unlimited wage players around 75 to 80 just to keep it a bit more tough. I'd of course go for older players as well because that is a trend that the MLS has been going on for the last 20 years. So focus on older players between the ratings of 75 and 85, with only 1 of them being above 80. To recommend a team to choose, I've also split the league into 3 different ranks. We've got the better quality teams, so these are the teams already ready to challenge for the title: Minnesota, Portland and Seattle Sounders. Next up, we have the high potential teams that could be ready to challenge in a couple of years, which I'm going to recommend both the Los Angeles teams, so that's LAFC and LA Galaxy. And then finally, we've got the road to glory teams. So these are the worst teams in the league, and you're going to need a lot of effort to get them ready to challenge. So this includes two of the newer teams, Nashville and Cincinnati, but also established quite good teams in the past, Salt Lake and Vancouver Whitecaps. I personally recommend Vancouver Whitecaps because not only are they Canadian, so you can focus on bringing up a national team as well as your team, but they also have a real stadium in the game, and they're home to EA themselves, so they do have quite a few little touches in their stadium that you might not notice for other teams. A couple of the other teams I've just recommended also have stadiums, so Seattle Sounders CenturyLink Field is on here, Dignity Health Sports Park in Los Angeles for LA Galaxy is in the game, Mercedes-Benz Stadium for Atlanta United is in the game, Providence Park for Portland Timbers is in the game, and the New Jersey Red Bull Arena for the New York Red Bulls is of course in the game. So if you're interested in real stadiums, the MLS does have 6 that you can pick from. In FIFA 22 there might be 1 or 2 extras added, I'm not 100% sure, but keep an eye out for them if you do an MLS save, because quite a lot of them are interesting and a bit different to European stadiums you might be used to playing in. So let's get to the most fun part of the video, which is recommending some signings if you do give this league a go. If you do start out as one of the Canadian teams, I would recommend going for some French-speaking players. Of course, a lot of French speakers live in Canada, so that's why I'd recommend players like Laurent Koscielny from Bordeaux to be a good centre-back, Kevin Prince Boateng in midfield, Papakouli Diop, another good defensive midfielder, or maybe someone like Mathieu Valbuena from Olympiacos, who would be a good winger in the MLS still. If you decide to do one of the LA teams, I would recommend some high potential Mexican players because that's what they have been doing in real life. Some options here include Jose Macias, Roberto Alvarado, or maybe even their very coolly named Santiago Muñoz if you want to relive your goal dreams. If you don't mind signing an older player, I'd also try and sign Guardado from Betis, just because I think he'd be interesting to see in the MLS. For every other team, so not the Canadian and LA teams, I would just recommend signing older players from Europe. Some of these could include Miguel Veloso from Hellas Verona, Valbuena, as I mentioned before, Kevin Gamero from Valencia might be interested, Dominic Criscito from Genoa, Carlos Bacca from Villarreal would be a good one, Quaresma, maybe even Carlos Tevez, signing him from Argentina, although he is at his boyhood club, so probably not going to happen. Negredo, Radu, Koscielny, as I mentioned, Guardado. There's so many of these big name players that would be interested in joining the MLS if you can offer them enough money. Of course, Giovinco is another good option. He's at Al Hilal now, but he was a superstar when he was in the MLS about 5 years ago, so he could definitely be a good player if you do want to bring both the MLS trophies to your team. So hopefully in this video you've learned quite a bit about which teams you want to use, what players are already in the league, and why the MLS is so fun and I recommend it so highly for FIFA 22. Do let me know who you choose, which players you want to sign, and if you do like the MLS more after watching this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you very soon for more league guides, more team guides, and more FIFA 22 content. Subscribe if you want to see it, but thanks for watching and goodbye.